Bonjour, hi, welcome to the stream. I'm Frank Boucher, I'm a Microsoft Cloud Advocate, and today with me, do a big X on the wall because today I have the legend, the only one, Brian Clarks, aka Clarkio with me. Hello Clark, how are you? Clark,
Hello,
like
Frank.
it's not your name, Brian, sorry.
I don't mind. It's all good. I'm not offended by being called by my name.
I must not be the first one doing that anyway.
No, not at all.
So
It's better than being called Brain instead of Brian. A lot of folks mix up the I and the A in my first name, and they'll say Brain,
oh yeah.
and I'm like, I don't know if maybe it's I don't really feel like I'm a brainy person. I'm pretty
Goofy.
like goofy, like goofy, cringy type of person. So
super happy to have you on the show after 36 or something episode. Finally twist your arm enough so you accepted to come on the show, talk about Azure today. Just like you probably on top of us and under us we have the title, the topic. So today we'll talk, we're mixing our two specialties, Azure and Visual Studio. Like on Twitch I'm always talking about Azure, and like most of the time on Twitch you're talking about Visual Studio Code and what we can do with it and everything. So today we'll be talking about the best extension from Visual Studio Code to do stuff on Azure and chat. If you have suggestions, things, maybe you think we forgot one, maybe you have question, don't hesitate. Like usual, Brian will ignore the chat, but I will pay attention and read the question and make sure he answer. So for those who from on you online or watching who don't know, I know in real life Brian, and that's why we're having so much fun, because we're joking. There's I like him, it's good, all friends. What else? Yeah, if you have questions, if like me, like the question come just when the show is gone. If you want to reach out, you can always reach us on Twitter. So my is fbucheros, mine is fbucheros, his is _Clarkio. I'm sure it will answer you over there. Did I forget anything, Mr. Brian?
I also stream on Twitch.
Yeah, stream Wednesday on this channel with Cecile about Python, and on your own channel about tons of stuff. But what are you doing these days?
Recently, actually, the past 2 Friday streams that I've been taking a look at digital accessibility, but in regard to being able to program via your voice instead of having to type out code or do things like that. Yeah, it's been really, really interesting. There's lots of cool tools out there for that stuff. But the one that we've been checking out lately is called Serenade.ai. It's a standalone application that you install on your machine, and then you have an extension that kind of couples with that. And it's really good so far from what I can tell. I have to get used to it and learn more about how to get more productive with it and efficient with how I command it. But yeah, so on there, I'm trying to learn how to do start to finish the full developer flow, right? So how do I initialize a project? And so far, last Friday, I was able to kind of do that just by voice. And then all the way to the end result of like, hey, let me run this thing and debug it. And that would be the end state, really. I don't know about deploying with voice or anything like that, but we'll see. We can see if we can incorporate that in the whole workflow too, after we achieve our first goal. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I just had a glimpse of that was Friday, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I just jumped by for a few minutes on your stream on Friday because I needed to focus. I was in batch processing mode.
Yes. Totally understandable.
You have those moments where like, yep, nope, it's not working. I just like need silence.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So how about we get started slowly and check the first extension. Are you ready?
I can be. Am I still sharing my screen with you already? You got it?
Not yet. You're not sharing your screen yet. But I was just waiting your thumbs up for that.
Thumbs up.
Your green light, your approbation, your approval.
Approval. Okay. You have my approval.
Excellent.
Share.
So now I'm sharing.
Okay, there we are. So, folks in the chat, in the stream, thank you all so much. This here is Visual Studio Code. I imagine most of you that are here may already be familiar with it, but if you're not, or you're watching this later and you're looking to learn more, Visual Studio Code is a lightweight text editor that you can choose how much you want it to be more of an interactive development environment versus just a plain old text editor by what things you enable and extensions you use. In particular, we're going to be looking at and focusing on extensions within the tool that allow you to connect and leverage Azure as your cloud provider for things like hosting web applications, hosting Azure Functions or serverless applications, storage, database, that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of extensions that you can add into here, turn on within Visual Studio Code. I think if you want to get it, if you don't have it already, there's two versions of it. One is Visual Studio Code Stable, which would be the blue icon. And you would go to code.visualstudio.com.
Do you want to show that screen too, Brian?
Sure. I'm going to need to share that because right now I'm just sharing. And you hear my daughter playing in the background too.
Oh, I thought I was here.
No, you thought it was your kids. Where'd my mouse go? There it is.
I heard some kind of noise and I thought it was on my side. You're lagging a little bit also, but could be me or could be any, tools that we use to stream.
Yep.
Sorry about that, Brian.
Switch to that window. No worries. It's fine. We'll chug along. We'll keep going here. I switched windows, but it seems to be lagging on me now. Oh no. Maybe it's my end, man. Now I'm worried, but my CPU seems to be fine.
Did you stop all the torrent download you were doing?
I don't do anything like that. No, I don't have anything to stop with that.
Your Plex server, any kids watching some cartoon to keep them busy?
No, nothing like that. It won't let me switch. It's like it froze on me. No audio right now, but is that a Clarkio and a wonderful Canadian?
No, right now it's Visual Studio that I see. Now, like, you could stop sharing, switch, and...
So I would love to do that, Frank. It's like frozen on me. I might have to drop and come back.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's no problem. You know what? I will go back in this screen and yeah. So do what you have to do, buddy.
Okay. It won't even let me leave.
Robert Table is there. No audio. Brian didn't pay his internet bill this month, so he's having a few issues. So we'll go wash some dishes and come back just after. Oh. Apparently the second try did fail. At least he could have smiled. Don't you think? Like, when you know that's the last image you're leaving. Do I have and I don't have a screen where it's only me, so like I'm sorry to do that to you, buddy. Or maybe, oh no, like if I do that it won't be good. So yeah. So eventually I hope it is not rebooting. Maybe he was scared, didn't have prepared enough content, and expectation were high, so he decided, you know what, I will fake some tech issues. Is he back? Yes, he is.
I'm
Whoop.
back in business, baby. Hello?
Okay. You're there.
Are we rocking and rolling?
Yeah.
Am I still choppy?
I think you're smoother, though.
I think I'm better.
Yeah.
Look at that. It was me all along. I'm so sorry. Yay. Okay, we fixed the problem.
Like I said, I explained all your problem that, you didn't pay your internet bill. Now you just went to wash a few dishes. So, like, they give you a few minutes.
Yeah. All right, we're all set now.
Okay, so let's
Sorry.
share the screen again.
Should we start from the beginning?
Hello, welcome to the stream. And Robert Table just joined us.
Oh, all right. Well, then we can go home now. Just kidding. Good to see you.
Bring him on the show.
You should. Good to see you, Robert Tables. All right. And Athic is on there. Clark, your video a little like I got you. And Danish. Hey, what's up, Danish? Okay, so Visual Studio Code. If you've heard of it, if you've not heard of it, go to code.visualstudio.com. I'm going to drop a link in the chat room for everybody. There's two different versions of Visual Studio Code. There is the blue version. It's kind of like the Matrix. You got the blue pill, and you got the not red but green pill. Okay, and depending on how adventurous you're feeling, you pick one. Okay.
Like, even I will let you finish, but even like the second option is, it never failed on me. I'm not using it anymore, but on you it did.
No. I agree with you. I was saying, yeah. So the blue version is it's called the stable version, basically. And with that one, you get about a monthly, pretty much every month, barring some holidays and things like that. You get a new update of like new features, bug fixes, things like that the Visual Studio Code team will publish to you all. It's usually on a monthly basis.
Yep.
The other version, so that's the blue one. That's when you see the blue icon like in the top left here. The other version that you have, so if I go to, like if you click on this will tell you the latest version that's out there. So the August 2020 release just came out. They always name the release after the month when the work happened. So they did the work in August, but they released it in the following month, so September. So this is how you can see the release notes and what has changed over time with Visual Studio Code. But in addition to that,
the funnier way to know what has changed, you watch Clarkio video about it.
True. However, I've stopped doing those because they are now doing, but that's a good segue, Frank, because they are now doing, they're doing launch parties. So shameless plug, because I've hosted, this is going to be my second time hosting it this week. On Wednesday at noon Eastern, there's going to be another 9 a.m. Pacific and then 4 p.m. GMT, UTC, time zone math in the head. I will be hosting the launch party again, where the people from the VS Code team will be on the call and demoing some of the features and updates that they've put out in this latest version of Visual Studio Code. So they're starting to do that now, and I'm like, okay, well, let's do that and focus on that and see how that goes for a little while, and I'll cut back the videos. So that's, but we do have an archive of all the videos for like pretty much every release for the past 3 years. So I see Sora Live says Linux greater than Windows. I mean, hey, to each their own. If you like that, that's fine, because Visual Studio Code will work on your platform as well. So you can see, you had something, Frank? Go ahead.
On all platforms, because like other icons were hidden by our pretty faces. That's why in the stream, now we see all of them.
There you go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So yeah, you can download this. This is where you go to download the stable version. But if you wanted to download the insiders version on the main page, again, code.visualstudio.com, you click this little down arrow, which is behind Frank's head. So I'll scroll up a little bit.
So yeah, usually you won't have my face in your screen, or if you do, be worried. Something is wrong.
Are you a hacker, Frank? Is that what you're saying?
Used to be, but not anymore. I'm not 15 anymore.
I gotcha. And then you have the option between stable or the insiders version. Now the insiders version is one with the green icon. The difference with that one is you're going to get more frequent updates, but at the same time, there's potential, or there's maybe a higher probability, but as Frank was mentioning, I've been using the insiders version, higher probability for bugs and things to be a little bit wonky and not necessarily work as smoothly as you would expect in the insiders version. That's because you're getting like nightly updates throughout the week, Monday through Friday kind of thing. Yeah. But in my experience, and like Frank was sharing, I use the insiders version as my main version of Visual Studio Code while I'm developing. And there's been a handful of times, I can count on my one hand, like maybe 3 times, where I've had it to where it was so disruptive in my workflow because things weren't working so well. But the good part about that is you can actually install the stable version and the insiders version at the same time, or have them both installed side by side. And I just quickly open the project up in the stable version and I keep working. I don't miss a step, basically. So there you go. So if you want the latest and greatest features quicker than on a monthly basis, then go with the insiders version. If you want to play it safe, stick with the stable version, the blue icon. All right, so that's Visual Studio Code. Any questions? Any questions, class?
All you need is a Vim. Come on.
Vim is cool.
No, Vim is awesome. I just I'm too old to start learning all the shortcuts key for Vim. I did try it, but
I don't know that I'm too old for it, but I'm also lazy, I would say, is like my excuse, that I don't want to take the time to learn all that stuff. But I am envious of people that are very quick with just keyboard navigation. But it actually ties into what I was talking about earlier. I've seen and heard that if you use some type of command line based editor, text editor like Vim or Emacs, those types of tools, when you do programming via voice, it's actually more I don't know, just more conducive to that type of approach into programming because of how Vim and Emacs have been built to be very shortcut friendly and kind of, so you could tie voice commands very easily to those types of navigation around your code within those tools better than some of the visual tools that are out there like VS Code or Atom or WebStorm, whatever it may be, right? In terms of that kind of stuff. So yeah. Okay, so that's Visual Studio Code, and we're going to be talking about the extensions that are kind of available within it to help you and enhance your development experience when working with Azure as your cloud provider. Yeah. So let me share my VS Code screen.
So Visual Studio Code, just to open our parentheses, but because a lot of time when I'm at conferences and stuff or like meetups, a lot of people are asking me because when I present, a lot of time I will be using VS Code. Mm-hmm. And I do that most of the time because I have tons of other program that runs. So VS Code is lighter, faster, like it takes more resources on my PC. So that's one of the reasons that I use it when I'm presenting. Yeah. But people say, oh, like, is it better than like Visual Studio, like the big one that people like it, or like the IDE, or the other big IDE? I forgot the name of the one by JetBrains. All the others, they're more. Mm-hmm. Like it's not the same thing. Like when you're in .NET, for example, like in Visual Studio IDE, you have all the bells and whistles, like all the wizards, everything is in the big Visual Studio. So of course it's like you are in that big car, luxury car with all the feature possible, compared to just your car that is good to commute. It's not the same thing. But the beauty of Visual Studio Code is you could customize it depending on what type of activity you're doing. So if you're different language, you could add just some feature. I use it also when I'm writing, blogging. So it will be Markdown. I will add like maybe a grammar tools and stuff like that because, I'm second language in both French and English. I do grammar mistake all the time. So like that's the beauty of it. And today, like today we'll be focusing on everything related to Azure, but that's not like the best extension. It's best when working on Azure stuff.
Sure, yeah. I think also, I think you bring up a good point, and I've heard that question kind of come up before too. Like, well, what's the difference between Visual Studio, like the one you used to do like C#, .NET, and other types of development within it, versus VS Code? And I think it's, in my opinion, and the experience I've heard from others, you kind of go with Visual Studio, like you said, to get all the bells and whistles, but very much specific to like C# and .NET development. Like if you've lived in that space and done that to some capacity, whether professionally or as side projects and whatnot, like that, you're gonna have a better overall experience, I think, there. But if you wanted to, but what I've heard from people that are live in that tool is that they generally do development there, but if they need to do something quick, right, they don't need to necessarily get the full car with all the features loaded up right away. They might use VS Code to do a quick, editing on some C# files, which you can do. You'll get a rich development experience doing C#.NET in Visual Studio Code still. It's just you might not get all the bells and whistles of it. But here's the thing. The key point here is the idea is Visual Studio proper is still very well done, like a fantastic tool to use for all kinds of development in that space. VS Code is great as well, and you get to make of it what you want it to be, right? In terms of like I was saying before, it's kind of like you get to choose on the spectrum of whether it's like a full-blown IDE, which has all the bells and whistles, interactive development environment, versus just a plain old text editor, and that's like very limited in capabilities, via the extensions that you enable on it and like what do you want it to support.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you can tailor it even more in the sense of like I can set up local, like per project VS Code settings to say I only want these extensions available and running. And so I really want to harp on this a little bit too. I need personally put this more into practice as well, is to isolate it to just the extensions I want for the type of development I'm doing in the tool. So as an example, maybe I'm just working on Azure related projects. I should probably only have things enabled around that, like the Azure extensions, which we're going to be getting to shortly. Or if I'm doing just node development locally, I don't need anything else like that, I'm not deploying it anywhere, then there's some extensions around that I only want enabled for that, like linting and, whatnot. Maybe like a builder, to minify some code, or the transpile TypeScript for me, something like that. I would only enable those extensions. And the reason I am pushing on this, or emphasizing it rather, and feeling that I need to put it more into practice is 9 times out of 10 when somebody approaches me saying, hey, I'm struggling with VS Code running well. 9 times out of 10, it's because
too many extensions.
Too many extensions, yes. Or the extensions are just, for whatever reason they have a bug in them, they weren't implemented in a safe way, and they just become kind of resource intensive. And so quick little troubleshooting tip. There's a way to.
Brian, let's talk about a few extensions, but I will save some minutes. Let's say 10 minutes at the end to talk about that, because personally I'm very interested into that. I'm not sure if you're referencing to something like the thing I'm thinking about, but I think it's important. So let's start just to make sure we cover the topic of the day.
Yes. Keep me in the line.
So
with what we need to do today.
Yeah. So chat, homework for you. Remind us to talk about that way to keep your Visual Studio Code lean. Is it clean? Whatever. Speed, fast. I don't know how to say it.
Sure.
Efficient.
Yeah. All right. So Azure extensions for Visual Studio Code. If you bring up the extension marketplace, that you can either click on that little icon in the top right there, the little building blocks. For me, it's top right. It might be on the top left for some folks. That might have the sidebar up there by default. Yep. And then you search for Azure up there. And the top ones you're going to see, one, you should double check that they are published by Microsoft to make sure you're getting the right ones there. And there's a couple different types of extensions you can do. One way, if you just, you're working all the time with Azure, and you're going to be using different products and services, and you kind of want to get the baseline foundation of the tools related to that, there's an aggregation-based extension that I call it. It's basically an extension that pulls in a bunch of other extensions that are specific around a certain type of work that you're doing. In this case, Azure. So there's the Azure Tools extension. And then in there, it lists out that there's 10 extensions that come as part of this bundle. And that it shows you the specific ones as well: Azure App Service, Azure Functions, Azure Storage, databases, ARM, Azure Resource Manager, CLI tools, Docker, pipelines. And these are the ones we're going to kind of highlight a little bit throughout the session today to show off like what they're capable of doing, at least the ones that I'm kind of familiar with. And then there's ones that I'm not necessarily familiar with, but maybe Frank, you might be, like the ARM template ones, the Azure Resource Manager extension.
That one I know.
Yeah,
I've been using it, kind of.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to put you on the spot in helping with the discussion today.
Oh.
So this is one way to get them, right? If you know you're going to be using like a lot of these, but maybe you don't want all of them. Maybe you're not going to be using Azure Storage, Azure CLI tools. You can install them individually, which is kind of the approach I went. But in general, they all rely on Azure account, because what's going to happen is you're going to need to sign into your Azure account in order to be able to use the resources and the service plans that you have set up for your application under your subscription that you have. I'm already logged into mine, and I've already installed a lot of these. As you can see, I haven't installed Azure Tools based on this install button here in the top right. But some of the other ones that are there that are outside of this package too, Azure IoT Hub. I mean, you just search Azure for like whatever part of Azure you might be using, you're likely to find an extension that coincides with that. So yes, there we go. All right, so the first one up is Azure App Service. For folks that maybe aren't familiar with Azure App Service, it's it's a platform as a service offering from Azure, so that you can run and host your applications, varying languages that you might be using. I personally do a lot of development in JavaScript with Node.js and host Node.js applications via this approach. And let's take a look at what that looks like. After you install the extensions, you're going to get a new icon in the activity bar. That's that sidebar over there. And it's going to be the Azure icon. I think, yep, it's over my head, so you can't, my head's not blocking. I was just making sure my camera wasn't blocking it.
If you want, I can move us in the top right corner. Would it be better?
No, I think we're good. I'm keeping in mind and just double checking out of the corner of my eye what the output looks like on stream. So I guess a quick link for everybody to share with everybody in chat for the Azure App Service one. I'll drop that in the chat room. Also,
I was trying to make short link because those links are very long. I'm just struggling with my tool here.
No worries. I dropped it in the chat for people to check out. So what that'll do is you're going to see a bunch of these here because of all the other extensions I have installed related to Azure, but there's going to be a little collapsible chevron area within the Azure view from the activity bar. It opens up a side panel here, and then you'll have App Service as one of them. And then you'll see your subscription and then anything related to that subscription. So when you expand this view, we can see some of the other App Service instances that I have. And so like I have one for my Lightbot stuff. I have one for another project where I was doing some security kind of demonstrations and stuff like that and so forth. And then once you're in there, so that's ones that are already existing. But if you wanted to create a new one, there's a couple of options that you have within that sash, I guess you would call it. I think it's called a sash, potentially. This top panel that's collapsible here. You have create a new web app. I know it's super tiny. I don't have a way to zoom in quickly off the top of my head. Or if you wanted to deploy directly to one without even creating it, maybe I'm already in my project.
Are you in Windows?
I am on Windows.
Windows Plus.
Windows Plus.
I think it is Windows Plus.
Yep, I brought up the magnifier view. And I don't know how that's oh no, things are going crazy for me right now. Flashing. I know it's not flashing for other people, but for me it's unbearable. Sorry. I think it's some other tools that I have going on my machine that's messing with it. In any case, it's the little plus. I could zoom in like this actually. Make it bigger. There you go. See? This plus create new web app. Deploy to web app. So if you're in a project already, so like if I spun up a Node Express application and I'm in that folder, I can choose to deploy the source code directly on my machine up into Azure. Now, a lot of our friends that are in DevOps, developer operations that are, practice good practices when it comes to making sure we have pipelines in place that can do testing, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development. Our friends that are in that space that specialize are going to be like, no, we do not, push to production directly from our machines, right? But in the cases of when you're just doing development, maybe on a side project or just a proof of concept, or it's just a development environment, right? And you want to deploy it and see what it's like deployed. This is a great way to do that directly from VisualStudio Code. Among other ways that you can set this up too. I mean, you can, if I expand one of these, for instance, we'll see some options here. You'll see like there's deployments. So I can configure it to deploy based on when I commit to my source control management system based on Git. So maybe you're using GitHub, maybe you're using GitLab, maybe you're using Bitbucket. You can connect those and have it deploy based on that if you'd like within Azure App Service. But we're getting a little bit into the specifics of Azure App Service and not so much the extension. But what's nice is within the extension here in VS Code, you can look at those things. You can read the logs. You can change environment variables. In this case, in Azure, we call them application settings, and configure those if you'd like directly from here. Those types of things. I'm checking in on chat. I see Robert Table says, I'm not even an Azure Pro, but the things I've seen from ADO, it looks absolutely amazing. That's awesome. Could I blow your mind and tell you what you can use ADO to deploy things to AWS? Wild, right? Robert Tables does that make it multi-cloud S Frackberg? I think so. So that said, hold on a minute. So yeah, you can explore all the different functionality that you would typically get. For those of you that are familiar with Azure and going via the portal to look at these things, you get a lot of that flexibility directly from your editor Visual Studio Code using this extension for App Service. And we're going to see this common trait throughout the other products that we could use within Azure directly from Visual Studio Code.
Yeah,
Any questions there?
The goal is to be more productive while in the development phase, right? So like when you're, deploying every 5 minutes because you're trying to debug something or trying to track your application or coding, like when you're in the, so of course you can deploy, there's tools to do that, but like you said, like when you are in production, when you're ready to push to QA or something, like a more like real environment, not your workshop, your dev environment, then like you use a proper tool.
Yeah, I just wanted I wanted to make sure you and I called that out, because I don't want to give people the wrong impression that maybe aren't familiar with those other things that happen and they think that might be a good practice, right? But in terms of development, it's a fine practice. And I see in chat, Bill Dathis has joined us, says hello and bonjour, everyone.
Yeah. Well, you say bonjour, but you could say bonjour if you want.
Oh, did I say it wrong? All right, we need to work on that probably.
You say it correctly. It was with
bonjour.
A strong English accent, but like, guess what? You're speaking English, so that's totally fine.
Okay. So yeah, that's Azure App Service VS Code extension, and I have some examples of that already running. But again, if we have time permits at the end, we can maybe step through doing actual deployments from it. But yeah, the idea behind all of this, right, is to speed up your efficiency, your productivity.
Yes.
Yeah, so that you're not doing this context switching. What I found before I started using the extensions was, going to the Azure portal in the browser and then maybe going back to my code, right? And back and forth and back and forth. And the less I have to do that switching between windows, even though it seems like a minuscule amount of effort and maybe like a fraction of a second, it adds up over time. And I'm very much into micro optimizations when it comes to my development workflow, because of the fact of how repetitive things can be when we're in that flow. So the idea here is to stay within the same context as much as possible, as long as it's conducive to keeping us productive. And that's what the benefit of using these extensions when you're working with Azure are here. All right, any questions about Azure App Service and the extension there, chat? If so, feel free to drop them in the chat room.
One very cool thing also is when you're running, I think you can get back the log, right?
Yes. Let's see. I'll look at more.
I know it's possible with the Azure function, so we could look at it later on. I'm assuming you will talk about the Azure function too, but yeah, log. So that's pretty cool. So when your app is running in Azure, you could stream the log locally to see it inside your console. So that's pretty cool. So you're running in Azure, then you clickety clack on your app, and you see the logs locally. That's kind of very nice.
Yeah, so as Frank was explaining that, we saw that it was spinning to kind of connect to that instance in Azure App Service that I have for this tool that I built for this channel to help share the analytics of this channel, like how many viewers it gets, how many based on all the analytics that Twitch provides. You have to be logged into Twitch to be able to see that, but we have teams at Microsoft that they have their own shows on it. Like Frank has the All Around Azure show, right? And they want to be able to see the analytics without having to have us share passwords and logging into the same account kind of thing. So I built out this tool that helps kind of share that with the team internally. And yeah, so this is what we're looking at here, this particular app instance. And then I expanded the logs on that, and you can see I can connect to the log stream, or I could see the log files based on day, the TXTs, if I wanted to that. So essentially anything that my application might be console logging out will show up in these logs and be captured within that space, within that instance of my application running in Azure App Service.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions or thoughts, comments?
One time, two time. Next.
Next. Okay, the next one
up is
You can
always come back with any questions anyway, at any time, that's for sure.
Of course. All right, so that was Azure App Service. Then I want to take a look at, I haven't used Azure Functions quite a bit, so I might need your help a little bit, Frank, with this.
Yep.
In terms of maybe explaining things a bit more, but it's because it's been a minute since I've used it. I've been mostly using App Service and Azure Databases extensions recently.
And I just put the Azure extension inside the URL inside the chat.
In the chat.
If you're interested.
Excellent.
Though, like you can always all find them in VisualStudio Code, but sometimes, like if you want to see example how they use it and everything, like you have the web page when you go on the market, but like the same web page I think we are partially seeing right now in the screen because everything is zoomed in or zoomed out, zoomed in, and right when it's closer.
Yeah, zoomed in. I can zoom out a little bit.
No,
I zoomed in.
Fine. That was me trying to. It's the other way around in French.
Okay.
You know, the alarm go off when it starts. For me, it's really strange. But
oh, I didn't. You know, I didn't. Wow. Yeah, you're right. We got some
it always
funkiness
confused
in the
me,
English
like
language.
hanging
Yeah.
on the phone when like you say, am I hanging out or hanging off? Like it's always confusing. Like I'm always not sure. But anyway, so on the web page, and that's why I share them. You have a lot of information where you're not sure, like what's that one. And I want to get back to one thing you mentioned earlier, Brian, because you mentioned to check that owner or the creator, the publisher of the app was Microsoft. For those one like that we share today, that like the Azure Tools that like use the one that come from Microsoft, but there's plenty of other app that are done by other that are very nice, but you just need to keep that in mind that, you know, like if you don't know who's the publisher, maybe you should do your little research because, you know, you're installing that on your PC.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you're installing. So I guess a little bit about that. I know that the folks on the VS Code team, that when extensions get, added to the extension marketplace, they have some vetting that goes through to check it to some degree and make sure that there aren't people trying to do, like to try and trick people, So I just want to at least share that to know that like I'm not saying that somebody's going to do something malicious through like an extension that they built on their own that's for Azure in some way. I'm just saying for these particular ones that were, like you mentioned, the ones that we're showing off today are from the publisher Microsoft directly, so that you know that you're getting that true sense of like what the extension should be that you're looking for.
And I think it must be true for a few applications, like when I'm trying to connect to I don't know, I'm trying to see like if I had the MongoDB extension, maybe there's one done by MongoDB. I will start by that one instead of, taking Joe Carlo, because maybe Joe Carlo extension is fabulous and I'm just making names. I have no clue of anything. Trying to give example, but maybe is like that's the app that everyone is loving and everything. Though like I would start by the official one and then like you go somewhere else.
Yes, I concur.
Okay.
Do you concur?
Yeah.
Hey, Oscar in chat and Surly Dev, by the way, thank you for being here. All right, so Azure Functions. Azure Functions, really quick rundown, brief overview of it. I mean, I imagine most people watching All Around Azure might be familiar with this, but for folks that maybe aren't, Azure Functions is the serverless option within Azure, serverless product that you can use for running those types of applications that are, they basically spin up and run when needed. You're only using resources in the instance of running your, operating your code. And then when that's done running its operation, those resources scale down or cut down to where you're not having to pay for things to be constantly on, kind of thing.
You pay for what you use to the second.
Yes.
So that's pretty
cool.
To the
second? Does it go any like more precision than just the second? And what about millisecond?
No, it's by second. It's not bad.
Yeah.
If depending on what SKU you're choosing, but let's say you're using the standard one, I think you have 10,000 transactions for free. So like transaction mean like a call. So depending on like how intensive are your calls, like it is very budget friendly to use Azure Functions serverless.
Yes.
Cool.
I see Robert Tables made a joke in chat saying might as well just be down to the hour if you're installing node packages. Because node modules can be quite heavy. Have you seen that there? Well, I digress.
I discovered that recently.
Yeah.
For my chatbot on my channel that I started doing. That was my first node application ever. And my community decided that I should do it in JavaScript, so I used Node.
Yeah.
At first, I tried to go without Node, just like pure JavaScript. But if I need files and everything, it was much simpler to bring some Node stuff with me. And package.
It's quite the file. I remember. Well, yeah, I could spend all day talking about that too. But it's not to knock Node and Node Node modules and that type of system. Although I feel like it's felt a bit more for developers working in that space. But you can find that in all development spaces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. With that, whatever package library management system that you have and dependencies that you add into your project, it happens on any programming language that you have too.
Yeah, and there's tools, and Node is supported. The npm package package manager is supported natively on a function. So when you do a JavaScript function, like it will prep your stuff correctly. But there's a way to optimize, of course, your Azure function.
Yeah. I see we have a question in chat from Surly Dev. Surly Dev says, would you use Azure Functions if you wanted to monitor chat on a stream, for instance, and wanted to react in some way to comments of questions? Could Azure Functions then serve up a web page with them on, or would some other Azure technology be more appropriate, such as a VM that was spun up for a couple of hours and then shut down? I guess, should I take that first, Frank, or did you want to
give it a try?
All right. So in my opinion, for something that's like chat based, right, event based, or for that, I would say, even though like for a stream, right, we're talking about I assume you're talking about a stream chat, right? Monitor chat on a stream. Yes, you said that. It's early dev. So because it's for a limited time in that sense, like let's say an hour somebody's streaming, I still feel like, in my opinion, if you want to monitor chat messages, it'd be more effective to have something on for the duration of the stream, like consistently, so that you capture things properly, than the constant like sending because like messages can happen so frequently depending on the number of viewers and number of people feeling chatty in that moment. You might end up just having to try and process and send it out to the serverless application like very repetitively. And in that case, it makes more sense to me to have just something running that whole time for the session of a stream than it would be to have a serverless, because of the nature of how a chat happens, right? Unless it's like super asynchronous where there's lots of times in between those events happening, right? What are your thoughts, Frank? Do you agree, disagree?
I would agree to have like if you're thinking about a web app or a container, just trying to because Robert Table is
summon
here.
Robert Table.
Yeah. Having dedicated resources for a stream, since it's like you'll have better performance, because when you're using serverless, the time of response could be not consistent. So sometime it will be super fast, sometime it will be just fast. So like if you want a very snappy, you're always better with like a dedicated full-time on resources, because your stream will be X hour. I think it will be more efficient that way. But it will work for both solution. Like on both sides, it will work. It's just I would go, if I was about to build something, I will go and have something turn on for the duration of my stream.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think the other part of that though is like to be listening, you have to have something that's going to be listening to the chat too. Like when a message comes through there. Well, again, I'm specifically thinking, well, if you have to have something consistently running and always listening for chat messages, at least a component that's part of that, right? If you want to process chat messages in a certain way and only specific ones, serverless could be useful or make sense in that scenario, right? But
Yep.
the sense of like having to always listen for chat messages and then doing something, like figuring out what to do after knowing that there's a chat message, you're always going to have something running and on, at least for the duration of when you want to be listening. Whereas like the serverless side of things could handle the offloading, the processing of what to do as a result of that message event being raised. So
no, both Shirley Dev, like he's asking, like, so serverless Azure Function is more for small focus. No, like I said, like it will be good for both. I did use Azure Function. That's not true. Was it? Yeah. Well, when you have a lot of events and stuff like that, you will have like now we're getting in architecture, but you have like an event grid or event hub in front of it. I was using serverless to manage connected car, so I had like millions of cars sending thousands of messages every second. But you need something in front to catch all those things and fan out, and like you have a different architecture to, but just for a chat, so you need something that look to the message and stuff like that. I think something that is always on could be better. It depends. Maybe if it's like we're thinking about a major event, maybe you could have an Azure, like some Azure function to take the process and queue the. It depends on every case, I think. But I think if you're talking about the user group presentation, I think it will be more efficient, less complicated, easier to follow everything if it's just a web app you're turning on, or a container. Could be a Azure container instance that you use or something like that. Or it could be Azure function. I think it's all kind of equal, but I think it will be a little bit more. It will be a little bit more easier if you're using a web app. I think.
Yeah. And the only thing I'll add here too is I'm always like, I tend to think of, because of the type of development I do, I'm doing API based development. I'm thinking of HTTP requests. That's not to say that, so, and when the reason I bring that up is like, when I think of serverless, I think the typical way I tend to use it is via, HTTP triggers, and HTTP request comes in. But I feel like we're doing it, if I only focus on that and not share with everybody that there's other triggers that are possible when it comes to serverless tooling and products that are out there, things that are event-based. And if there's ways that we could tie into, like, again, thinking specifically to like a Twitch chat situation, where if Twitch could somehow raise those events to a serverless endpoint that does listen to like webhooks or web sockets in that kind of way to be a trigger instead of HTTP requests, that might be another alternate solution to approach that type of scenario, certainly. But again, hopefully this all has helped answer your question a little bit, or at least spark some ideas for you, certainly, Dev. And if not, feel free to keep asking in the chat, and we can elaborate more, because that's what these are about, right, Frank? I mean, it's your show. I'm sorry. So, yes.
That's the priority. Helping people discovering Azure with the baggage they have, and just ease their building experience with Azure. That's the goal of the show. So we're totally in.
Awesome. Okay.
So I see a question for
autopilot mode.
Hermione. Sorry?
I was just apologizing because sometimes I go into like autopilot mode,
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. I could mute you if I want.
Fair.
I won't do that though, but I could. No, so I see a question from Hermione. Say, do Azure Logic App has a trigger for Twitch chat? Not that I'm aware, but it's not impossible that it exists. However, you could build your own connector to Logic App. So do you know if there's one, Brian?
I don't know. The thought had crossed my mind as well, like back when I was building like my chat bot for my stream. And at the time there wasn't like a native one, and then I just never so I don't know that there's a native one. It's been a while since I've looked in terms of a connector that's available that you can just turn on within Azure Logic Apps.
But it receives HTTP
but there may be one
so
now.
You could do whatever you want.
Yeah, right. There's ways to create custom connections too, so that could be possible approach. And then we have a question from IRayCD. Can I use serverless for software as a service monolith Node.js? I would say yes. I would say it depends on the specifics of that monolithic Node.js application that you're working with.
Again, if it's to build a backend. No, Node.js, then it already has a backend, right? Not sure.
What do you mean by backend necessarily? Just make sure I'm on the same page.
Server side.
Oh yeah. And Iray says yeah.
Because I think my first thought was about the static website, and yes, you could use Azure Function to have something dynamic to do your static website, but you're already in Node, so you already have a server side. So in that case, you could build a full website just using Azure Function and like using the proxy to, you know, proxy all your path and like have your routes and everything. But I think could be, I don't know, it depends on what kind of website. I think like I call that exercise of style. When you're just picking a tech and try to do something, it will work, but they are probably more easier path to follow.
Sure, yeah.
So what was
and
this?
yeah,
Yep. Well,
I'm not as knowledgeable in the space. I don't want to point anybody in the wrong direction. I would say it's possible, like you can, whether or not it's a good or efficient or cost effective, right? Because this is the other thing to keep in mind, right? You're going to be using the kind of enticing thing with serverless in general is you're only paying for what you're using. I don't know why I was getting that backwards. You're only using what you're paying for. I was going to say it that way. I mean, you're only paying for what you're using. But in the same sense, you also got to think about the performance of taking that approach and having that type of architecture. And I think depending on the different applications that you might be building out, the project type that you have, you may be beneficial to go all in on that approach as your architecture, or maybe a hybrid of like, maybe you have a platform as a service running and then you have some serverless components tied into the architecture. You know, it's on a case-by-case basis where I would evaluate that, for one, and two, there are people that kind of are more knowledgeable in the space that can point you in the right direction once they have those types of details than someone like myself who hasn't. I'm aware of it. I've used it. I've learned it, like how to use the Azure Functions, and I've had fun doing that before. But in terms of running something in production, I have not personally done that. My experience has always been, you know, running like an app service type of thing in production has been where my development experience professionally. So that's why I tend to defer to the other experts in Azure Functions than me.
And the second part of the question was, when I was working with serverless, the load time of a DB connection was taking more time. Is it a right way or better way to do that with Azure Function? Depending on the database you're using, now inside Azure Function, you have identity. So if your database support identity, like the Azure Active Directory, that will be the most efficient way, because this way your connection will be kind of already done. All the age shaking will be done, so it will be very efficient. Otherwise, yes, it's true that if you're using a website compared to serverless, then, you know, in a website, your token will stay active longer compared to the serverless, who needs to reactivate that thing all the time. So yeah, it's possible. Surely they're saying, yeah, like, should we start building it?
Another time, another show.
No, definitely.
All right, so we've covered one extension so far.
It's good, you know, at least one. Good. The Azure
Very
one.
Good.
Excellent.
I mean, this is what live streaming is all about. And why would you show up if you didn't get a chance to ask your questions in the live stream and interact with us, right? Right, chat? So this is what it's all about. So Azure Functions extension, very similar in terms of what you're going to, the advantages in terms of having an extension built into Visual Studio Code for you to interact with using that product and in the resources you spin up when it comes to running Azure Functions up in the cloud. So I have that one installed already. Again, we go over to the Azure icon on the right-hand side, which is, you know, right up over here kind of thing. And in this case now, there's going to be another sash or collapsible. My daughter's very excited about Azure Functions. I don't know if you heard that or not. There's another sash or collapsible area in the sidebar here, or the side view, and that is the Functions one. And you can see here, I was kind of actually, to the same question that Surly was talking about, this is an old resource of mine actually, where I was trying out, hey, how can I maybe apply serverless into my chatbot project, where I use this light bulb here that's shining on my, I don't know if it's, there we go. This normally, you can, from the chat room, there's commands in my stream where you can change the color of that. And I was toying with the idea of being able to build out that architecture based on serverless. So, you know, you can create a new function. You can create a new project. So the key concepts here with Azure Functions that I've learned is there's the project, or aka like the application as a whole, and then within it you can have individual functions or serverless components that you would potentially trigger in some way via like an HTTP trigger or an event or other ways, or maybe there's something that get inserted into the database and you want to trigger a serverless Azure function. That's where the the difference is in terminology here, right? So this first one, that's the folder, that's, you want to create a whole new project.
It's the function app. It's like
the function app. Yes. It's the thing that encompasses all of your functions within it, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of why I think it's good that they have this little folder icon to give you that sense and idea. That has things installed with the extension that allows you to be able to do that and start from scratch if you'd like. And then once you have that, you can create a function, or if you already have a function project on your machine that you cloned from somewhere and you wanted to deploy that under your own account, under your own subscription, and try it out and see the end result of it, you can deploy directly from here as well. Now, the same principle applies that we were talking about before. This is for the scenario of you're under development. This is not like you're going to deploy to production kind of thing. But it's definitely beneficial to have that type of workflow to experiment, to see the result of things being deployed in, the remote environment like that.
Yeah. And the VisualStudio extension for Azure Function is very well done also. So pair with the Azure Function CLI, you will even be able to run locally, debug locally. And same thing, I think maybe that's what you're about to show. Like you will be able to, again, download the log, stream the log down if your function is running in Azure, and I see all the different deployment slot and everything. All the information will be there, so it's very cool.
Yes, and so again, it's been a while since I looked at this one, and it's not like a fully fleshed out project because it was just me experimenting with my other project. Okay, so it looks like I do have this like hooked up to, like, whenever I make a commit to a Git repository, that triggers a new deployment to this function as well, and then that kind of stuff. So I can see all of that directly from the extension here, along with the logs, which the logs are going to be, I'm not going to bother trying to connect. I'm worried, being that earlier in the stream I was having some performance issues and the camera wasn't working, so I'm hesitant to try and trigger anything that's going to start using my CPU power right now. So that's why I know it feels like a little shallow in a sense of like I'm not going deep into things, but that's my reservations about going into that. So you would click on this, and then if there's any logs that are outputting that you console log within your application, you'll be able to see those types of things directly from here. It'll open up a new panel within VisualStudio Code. You can explore the files that are associated with this. No, the functions is really where the fun is at.
Yeah.
So I can actually look at this. If I click on this.
So now you have the default one. I think it's message.
Yes.
Hey GT Sum, I don't have the command bonjour here. I should bring it.
What's up, JT? So this is like the configuration of the bindings that I use. So I'm using the HTTP trigger for this particular function, and that's about it right now. And so it's the default one. But if the script file would be an index.js file that's up on there. Again, application settings being the environment variables that you might have for that, which for some reason, oh yes, it's because I have things for connecting to, like, I'm using Azure Bot. What's it called? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. What is it? The bot framework, Azure Bot Service and Framework, where it can do because this is AI based too, this cognitive service.
Azure Bot Framework?
Yeah, so I connect to it. I can connect to it via my function too if I wanted to, but I think I was doing it in my code directly if I recall correctly. About this one. Anyway, you get the idea. That's very similar to the Azure App Service extension, but specific to functions, which is our offering for serverless applications. We're getting a lot of this today, Frank. JT says 2 of my fave streamers on one broadcast. How fun.
Should do a screenshot and send that to our managers.
Yes. We've gotten a few instances of that. We definitely need to. Thank you, JT, for the kind words. Appreciate that. All right, how are we doing on time? We're
good.
Doing all right?
We still have about 25 minutes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so that was Azure App Service, Azure Functions. Let's go to the next one that I wanted to check out that I use more frequently than Azure Functions right now for my projects is Azure Databases. Now, what's really cool about this is you don't necessarily have to be using Azure to host your database types. You can connect to other local instances of your database. Let me just show you. I'm just talking about. But what's Azure Databases? It's being able to browse and query databases both locally. Yeah, it says it in the description right there. Let me scroll up a little bit so folks can see. Locally and in the cloud using scrapbooks. What are scrapbooks? Frank, what are scrapbooks? Do you know what scrapbooks are?
Well, I know the paper version of it, but scrapbook, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, a scrapbook, there's a link. I don't know what is this link? Mongo Scrapbooks. That's what it's about.
Oh.
I click on that. It allows you to basically write your queries in like a text file directly in Visual Studio Code, and then it'll execute those queries against your database. Yeah. So yeah, and it gives you rich IntelliSense that connect to Azure to manage your PostgreSQL and Cosmos DB databases with support for MongoDB, Graph, aka Gremlin, and SQL, previously known as DocumentDB. So I already have that one installed, so I'm going to go back over here again to the Azure icon in the sidebar. And now we're going to expand the databases / view here. And I don't know what this is. This is old as well. I probably should like spun up some things prior to us going live, but I mean, I never do. So there's nothing to show here. There's nothing to see here. I do have this one that's like running in Azure as well. But I don't know that I'm at liberty to show that one either. So yes, there you go. There's the idea. I mean, if I wanted to create a new one, let's create one. Let's do that. I want to create one that is Gremlin. I've never used Gremlin in my life. Gremlin, like the movie, and that works. I press enter, and then I choose my resource group. What's that? Is Gizmo? Yeah, Gizmo. Let's just go with that one, I guess, the Twitch chat one, and I want it to be in the East US. And there it goes. It's spinning up the like the movie. I know it's behind my camera here, but I'm getting a notification in the bottom right that's letting me know that it's spinning that up.
Gizmo is the name of Fragsburg dogs.
Yes, I forgot about that. That's true. Very true.
I was just talking about that movie with my friends during the weekend because I forgot why exactly we were talking about that, but the fact that they cannot eat after midnight, and we were asking ourselves, can they, like, you know, the water thing with them, was it like all the time or just after midnight?
The water thing was all the time, as if I recall correctly.
But it was the food that was after midnight.
Yes.
Okay. Because I remember that there was like an after midnight. In my mind, it was making no sense because it was like, it's always after midnight. You know,
you know, you bring up a very good point that kind of breaks down the whole point of.
But at the same time, like, you know, those animals don't exist, so.
Right. You're right though. Like it's maybe it's after midnight at nighttime, right?
Yeah.
It like once the sun comes up, that's not a problem. Yeah. Frackberg says I also have a Funko Pop Gizmo from Gremlins on my. Nice. Okay, that's cool.
That's cool.
All right, so that's taking a little. So the part of why this is going to take time, and we're not necessarily going to see the end result of this right now. One, because we have limited time on the stream, but two, it's spinning it all up from scratch for me, creating a new, resource group and that kind of thing. So yeah, we're and depending on my connection, my internet connection, which is being used by the stream right now, that's probably adding some latency to things. So in any case, you get the idea, and the screenshots definitely do some justice. Like we were talking about before, this scrapbook capabilities. If you look here, that like you type in your DB the collection name, and then you find one based on the name, and so forth. And then when you expand a database on this left-hand side, you can see what that looks like. So your different database instance or host, and then the databases within it, the individual ones. Like you might have an admin database, a config, a local to-do, and then the collections within that. This is for a MongoDB type of database. Think of it as a way to explore and query your database while in development to make sure things are being inserted properly or updated or deleted when you expect them to be. So that's kind of what's the benefit that I've seen in my own development workflow when using this extension for Azure databases. Cool. Any questions, comments, concerns? Frackbrick says water makes them multiply. Oh, food after midnight turns them into gremlins, I think. Oh, okay, I can't remember the last time I watched Gremlins. Yeah.
I just need to watch that movie. I can we say we crave to watch a movie? Is it the proper way to say that when you're looking forward to look the movie? How do you say that when you really want to watch it now?
Craving, yeah, you could use the word crave in English for that. Typically crave, would be like food. For food. Yeah, but people would get what you mean. CBA says, is Azure the same as cloud? Yes.
Yes. So Azure, and that's a good question. Was it CBA not? So not the OneDrive. So Azure is the Microsoft cloud. So there's many different cloud provider, and that's a good question. I have that like multiple times on a stream, and I'm happy you're asking it. So it's just the cloud from Microsoft. So inside of that you have tons and tons of feature, product, services. Most of them are called services because it's as a service. So OneDrive is one of them. You have the Outlook, Office 365. You have the Azure part where you can create a website, a container, and host your container, or create a database on demand and just say, hey, I want a cluster of Kubernetes, and just like boom, like 1 minute after, it's all ready to serve without any configuration from your part. So there's a lot of resources available for you over there.
Cool.
Yeah, you can totally run that if you want GPU or CPU or any kind of resources. You can have VMs, of course. So have a look. In fact, I have a link. You could go, I think it's cloud 5minute.ca, and then I think it's this.
Nice. So while you're doing that, it reminded me that I've been failing to show some of the other capabilities in the extensions when you right click on them. So like for instance, in Azure App Service, if I wanted to manage this instance a bit more, if I right click on it, I can start it back up, stop it, restart it, delete it from the right click context menu.
Oh, you can even delete it? Wow, okay.
Yeah, so it's probably a little bit dangerous of an option there. You might misclick, but I'm imagining they probably see one that like I'm not worried about deleting. It says, are you sure you want to delete? So it prompts you first, at least.
Because,
in case you accidentally forget. You can deploy to the web app. You can configure, generate Azure CLI, start remote debugging, which I think is really interesting. Because what you can do is you can, I'm so sorry. I really was like, let's keep this at the surface level and not necessarily go too deep. I can probably go on for hours about this stuff, but like that is really cool. The start remote debug. It is what it sounds like it is, folks. You're able to debug your code running in the deployed state. Again, a development environment, not something you want to do in production, like start debugging your production environment, but you could start setting breakpoints in your code that's running on the instance of your application in Azure. I think that's an amazing benefit of using this and having that capability. And then I didn't know about this, or maybe I probably did, but I'm struggling to recall, but you can SSH into the web app too and start, directly from your machine. Again, this type of stuff, well, the SSH in particular, typically I would go to like the portal.azure.com, go to the product I'm using, like Azure App, the instance of my Azure App Service, go to the different properties within it on that blade within the UI and so forth. And then use the SSH directly in the browser to that instance of my app service. But this is showing you that you can do this directly from your development environment. Frank says, take no chat. This is how you make Clark. You'll come back first. I guess so.
Yeah, you say, come, just talk few things. And then, he got excited and said, oh. So now you need to come back. But I think it would make an excellent, seriously, episode where we could dig in an app, try to investigate like some bug or problem inside your app and try to see how like that the one extension and go deeper. That could be cool. One or two, depending on like what kind of. Could be a pair. It could be the database and the app one. Then we use both of them to investigate. That could be pretty cool.
For sure. Yeah, like and again, just showing more of what's available via the context menu, you get more features. A lot of this too, as well, if there's one thing you take away, it's been a while since I've reminded people on stream about this. If there's one tip you take away about Visual Studio Code in general that you want to remember and learn and keep in mind all the time is the command palette, how to bring up the command palette, because that's another way. If you're not necessarily a point and click type of person, you want to keep your hands on the keyboard, or you can't think of, or you can't, like maybe you don't know about the right click context menu here, but you're like, hey, I really want to understand how I want to deploy this to this thing, or I want to start it or stop it. The command palette is the gateway to all things possible within VS Code. So to bring up the command palette on Windows and Linux, it's Control-Shift-P is the keyboard shortcut. And then I would say like, hey, I don't know, I'd search for it, App Service or Service Start, right? And there you go. You got all your different commands that are available via the extension directly in the command palette, and I keep my hands on the keyboard. I don't necessarily need to go right click on things with the mouse, move my hand to the mouse.
Open the menu, find a good item, and blah, 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 blah. You could just...
Precisely. And then that keyboard shortcut on Mac OS is Command, so Windows and Linux, Control-Shift-P. No, Command-Shift-P. The command key on Mac OS keyboard, yeah. And I don't know what's going on. Maybe I did something wrong here, but I've never seen it take this long. So it must be, again, something to do with my, streaming at the same time of doing this that might be slowing things down for me here. So that's still spinning and I can't get it to go away. But yeah, so there you go. So you right click on them.
Well, depending on which subscription you're deploying also, Brian, like some of our subscription that are Microsoft could be very busy right now because we are in preparation for some big events coming up.
What's that? Some big event that's coming up? You can say it, right? Wait, or we're not allowed to talk about it?
Ignite is coming, right? So
yeah,
we're working really hard on that.
Yes, fair enough. You're right. So the one thing I wanted to point out that triggered this whole thing for me was a lot of times as developers, right, you might spin up an instance of your database and then you're like, oh, I need to like manually type out or try and copy over the connection string. You can just right click the instance of that, your database directly from this Azure databases extension and say copy connection, and then you can paste it into
I didn't know that.
variables.
That's cool.
Yeah. There we go. All right, success. I taught Frank something on stream.
That's nice.
Yes. All right. We're getting low on time.
You want to show what was the thing we were supposed to show? Oh, how to enable some app. I think we have about just a tiny bit more than 10 minutes. So can we share stuff in like 5-ish minutes?
What are we sharing again? I'm forgetting.
At the beginning of the show, you were talking about, I think you were talking about workspace, but I'm not sure if it was about that.
Yeah, so I don't have a particular folder open right now, but like if I did, and I wanted to only enable, or even just this instance of VS Code that I have open, I can say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be using Azure Storage for this project. So I can say, hey, let me disable this. And then what that will do, it'll trigger to like have to reload VS Code so that it turns it off. But that helps, like, even though you might not be using an extension, some extensions might be implemented in such a way that they are always on within Visual Studio Code, even though you're not necessarily needing them to be on and running. And the architecture of the way VS Code works is to help separate the resources that are used for extensions versus Visual Studio Code itself, which is helpful, and that's what helps makes it performant. But even so, if that extension is implemented in such a way that could be resource intensive or blocking for VS Code, it can sometimes cause these hiccups in any case. So now if I search for Azure and I look at the storage one for this particular, actually for any instance that I run, the way I did that, it's going to have it disabled and it gets faded out. Depending on your theme, it might look different. I'm using the Night Owl theme in VS Code. But you see there's an option here. It's kind of faded out. It might be hard to see on stream. I'm sorry about that.
I think we're seeing okay.
Okay, yeah, so disable based on workspace. So that would be like the folder you're in for your project. It will create a settings.json file for you under a folder that's called .vscode. So you'll see that pop up and you're like, what is this about? It's so that VS Code knows when it opens up that project that you're in that currently for the folder of that project, it knows, oh, I shouldn't have these extensions on when I'm running in here in this context.
Okay, so workspace is equal to folder?
Essentially, yes. That's kind of the way I think of it, yeah.
Okay.
But you could potentially, I say that very loosely because a workspace could be a separate like thing with Visual Studio Code where you can have what's called a multi-root workspace, meaning there's multiple folders that are in different areas on like different paths on your machine, but you can connect them via the same workspace within Visual Studio Code. So that's why I say it loosely, but that's getting a little bit more into the advanced or complex, not necessarily complex, but like the weeds of
Okay,
workspace.
but if I'm like, most of the time I use VisualStudio Code in like a folder mode. I don't know like if it's a proper way to say that, but like I'm opening my project, so like it's in the full folder. So if I use disable for the workspace, it will be disabled in that folder. I'm opening another project and then like those settings won't follow. Oh, is that what you say?
Yes. So I guess maybe the best way is to just demonstrate really quick. That might be something to do. The one thing I wanted to point out that I'm recalling now at the beginning, really quick before I show that, is if you're ever running into performance issues with VS Code, the one way to start like troubleshooting that is to run VS Code with all extensions disabled. And the way you can do that, again, is bringing up the command palette and saying reload with extensions disabled. So you bring up the command palette, type in reload, and you say developer reload with extensions is disabled. That will turn off all themes, all icon themes, all other extensions you might have installed. Then open up your project like you normally would, like the folder that you have, and see if you're still running into the same performance issues that you were seeing prior to running it without the extensions, prior to running it with the extensions enabled, right? So that's the idea. That's a general feedback or advice I give to folks that are asking about this type of stuff, or mentioning that they're having an issue when it comes to performance. I'm like, well, 9 times out of 10, it's usually extensions. Try running it without extensions enabled, kind of thing. All right, so a workspace. I'm trying to think if I can. Let me stop sharing my screen really briefly, just to get something sorted out. If you want to just put us on camera, maybe if there's questions in chat you want to.
Yep. It's just the two of us now side by side.
Okay.
Yeah, because at one point I was suggesting to do an extension, like I had one extension in mind, but I couldn't do it because it was not making sense. So I asked Visual Studio to enable that natively, and my point was I would like to have kind of profile where like, hey, right now I am in Azure profile, so turn all the Azure extension on, and like maybe C# and everything else disable, and by profile change that wherever, like, but not attached to a specific folder. But and I couldn't do it myself because an extension, like, it make no sense to shut down other extension, otherwise you look very suspicious. Even if you're like, the goal is good, but you know, kind of strange.
Yes. Okay, I have something. I can share my screen and start showing at least a quick example of this. All right, so I have a project open. It's my TTV chatbot project. Did it show up on stream? Okay, yeah. So this, when you have just one folder open, that's kind of a these aren't technical terms. This is me describing it in my own words. It's kind of like a shadow workspace, right? Your folder is the workspace. And so this is just my one project, right? It's just this TTV chatbot. But let's say, imagine the holistic project, there might be an API that's in one repository maybe, or just a folder in itself. And then I have like the client side code, the web app part of it is in another folder. That's not the case here, but just imagine with me. I can add another folder to the workspace. So I Control-Shift-P, I look for workspaces. Oh yeah, there it is. Workspaces, add folder to workspace is what you want. Right, so I didn't know off the top of my head exactly what the terminology was, but then I would say I hit that, and then I come in here and I'm looking at my other repositories. Maybe this housebot one is what I want. I click add. Now the key here is to make sure you draw your attention to that sidebar where the file explorer is. What's going to happen is it's going to kind of shift things around a little bit. Notice how it looks a little bit different, and it also says at the top untitled workspace. So now this is what's called a multi-root workspace, meaning there's multiple root folders that are part of this workspace project as a whole. So imagine the chatbot was like my API part of it, and then the housebot, or maybe that was my client side stuff, and then the housebot is my...
Whoop, did I lost you? Ooh, you're lagging.
Uh-oh. Hello?
Okay, you're back.
There we go. We're back. Okay. Maybe the kid's watching a lot of like a movie or something, taking up all the internets at my house, the bandwidth. So what was the last thing you heard from me?
It's just things changed, And yeah, so now we have two routes.
Yes. So like, let's say the house bot was like the API project, and then the chat bot was like my client side that like connects to the API or calls that API kind of thing. So now this is a multi-root workspace, right? Because they're not under the same folder, root folder, they're under different root folders. And then you'll see at the top, it says untitled workspace. So what I could do now is I could be like, hey, let's do workspaces. Let's save this, save workspace as, and then I could like within like my main thing, it could be like, oh, you know, MS Dev Twitch workspace. And you'll notice it's kind of hard to see here.
But there's a special extension for that.
It's a file extension .code-workspace.
Don't save
and
it.
then what's that?
Just say don't save it, because then like in 1 month you will be like, what's that project? Like it doesn't make any sense.
It's fine. I always have that problem. It's all good. And so now I can, instead of having to do that over and over, like instead of opening up the one project first and then opening up the other one and adding it to the workspace, I can just double click on that workspace now, and VS Code will open up both of them for me. So yes, Robert Tables, it's like a meta file that records the details of the workspace. Yes. And now what's cool about this is you can go into what we were talking about before. If I come into like my extensions that I have, and maybe for this project, I don't want to have the, you know, like Azure Store or Azure databases enabled because I'm not using that. I can say, hey, disable it for this workspace. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to update, like I was talking about before. Actually, you know what? I don't know where it puts it. Did it put it here? Settings. No, I think there's like a hidden, probably a file
like
within the
now
workspace
that you
that
save it,
references.
that will be in your file that you just created. So where did you save your workspace?
Yes, it's
file?
probably in the JSON for that workspace file that's not visible in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, but if you did it on like, maybe you didn't have a multi-root workspace like I have right now, you'll see this .vs code folder, and then within there, there'll be a settings. And in here, you'd see some changes where it'd be like, hey, disabled extensions, right?
But
and that's for that individual.
If you disable an extension, oh no, okay, yeah, so it will be in your workspace also. Yeah, it's true.
Yes, it's based on workspace. Yeah.
Cool.
And
if I want to respect my schedule, I need to stop you there.
Okay, sounds good. I can keep going though. I mean,
well, you will have to come back, buddy.
I can't be stopped.
So thank you a lot, Brian, to take that time with us. Like, you could see the chat was super happy to see you, kind of course. That was, we knew that already. Well, I knew this. So thank you a lot for spending this time with us today, explaining all those extensions, all 3 extensions. We had big plans, chat. We had like a long list, but you know.
We did.
Thanks to you. Honestly, I'm super happy. I'm always very happy when the guest doesn't have the time to finish his demo or what he had planned. It means we were right spot on, like the topic was interesting and the chat participate, and the show is always as good as you are, chat. So thanks a lot to you to be here with us today, asking you those questions. It was fantastic, and I will work super hard to have Brian again on the show. If you are on Twitter, you know, share that so it will come back. And yeah, and now I see the chat and fire. I'm assuming it's just what kind of font? Oh, talking about font? What?
Somebody asked me what font I was using, so I was sharing that, and then I have a command that will share my social links automatically. So
cool.
There you go.
So with that, I would say to everybody, have a good day. See you tomorrow for another stream of All Around Azure, and Wednesday will be Brian with Cecile. And
yes.
The word of the end, Mr. Brian? Anything
what?
else to, like the word of the, no, like the, how do you finish the show? I'm letting you finish the show.
Watch out for gremlins, chat.
Watch out for gremlins, everybody. Bye-bye, yeah.